The midday sun was high and merciless, baking the dusty boards of the small-town depot where travelers came and went with weary steps and hopeful eyes. But on that day, all motion seemed to pause around a single figure, a young woman who had collapsed upon the bench, her head bowed, her pale face slack with exhaustion, her hands trembling faintly against the fabric of her faded dress. She had arrived with nothing but a small bundle clutched at her side, and though strangers passed, some slowing to glance, most hurried on, for in those parts kindness was rare, and hardship had made hearts guarded. But one man did not turn away. He was a cowboy, broad-shouldered beneath his denim shirt, dust clinging to his boots from the long ride across the prairie, his hat shading eyes that had seen both storms and stillness. As he tied his horse to the rail and stepped onto the platform, his gaze caught hers, or would have, had she been conscious enough to notice. In a swift stride, he was at her side, noting the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the dry lips, the way her shoulders slumped, like she had carried far too much weight for far too long. Without hesitation, he unhooked his canteen, poured water into a small tin cup, and knelt before her, his voice steady yet soft. "Ma'am, you're safe. Take a sip if you can." She did not stir at first, but he stayed patient, his hand holding the cup near, his other resting lightly against the bench so she might feel anchored. Not alone. Around them, the depot hummed with the distant calls of conductors, the creak of wagons, the whistle of an approaching train, but all his focus remained fixed on her. Slowly, after long minutes stretched thin with worry, her eyelids fluttered and she stirred, faint as a whisper waking from a troubled dream. Her eyes, when they opened, were clouded with confusion and weariness, yet they found his steady gaze, and in that instant she knew she was not abandoned. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into nothing. He lifted the cup gently toward her lips and she sipped, the cool water easing the dry ache in her throat. A faint color returned to her cheeks, and tears pricked at the edges of her eyes, not from sorrow but from the relief of being seen, of being cared for when she had nearly faded away unnoticed. "Thank you," she managed, her voice trembling but sincere. The cowboy smiled faintly, a curve of strength and reassurance. "You don't have to thank me, miss. You looked like you needed someone to sit with you a while." And sit he did, not rushing, not pressing for her story, simply offering his presence like shade in the desert. They sat together on the weathered bench, her frame still fragile yet steadied by the quiet strength beside her. Bit by bit she found words to share. How the journey had been long, how her last coin had bought a ticket but not a meal, how she had pressed on with hope, but her body had given out under the strain. The cowboy listened, every word sinking into him like the notes of a song. And though he spoke little when he did, his words carried weight. "You made it this far, and that says something. You've got grit more than most. Rest a spell, and when you're strong enough, you'll rise again." The sun slanted lower as they lingered there, the depot quieter now, shadows stretching long across the ground. And though her journey ahead was still uncertain, in that moment she no longer felt invisible. She had been seen, cared for, and reminded that even in the hardest places, kindness could still break through like dawn over the prairie. The cowboy stayed until her strength steadied enough for her to sit taller, her hands no longer trembling, her eyes clearer with resolve. He rose then, offering his hand to help her stand, and she took it, her fingers resting in his strong grip, the gesture speaking louder than any words, that she was not as alone as she had believed. As the train whistle echoed once more, life resumed around them, yet the memory of that moment carved itself deep. A reminder that sometimes salvation comes not in grand gestures, but in a cup of water offered, in the quiet companionship of someone willing to sit beside you until you stir. And as she stepped forward, steadied now, the cowboy tipped his hat, his smile simple, his voice low but carrying. "You'll be all right, ma'am. Keep going. You've already proved you can." Her heart, once heavy with despair, carried a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. Friends, if this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness and courage can change everything in a single moment, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories waiting here. Tales of strength, love, and hope that you won't want to miss. And each subscription helps us bring you more of the words and scenes that stir the heart and lift the spirit. So hit that button, stay with us, and let's keep walking this trail of stories together.